This podcast is brought to you by PLI, the Practicing Law Institute, committed to providing essential legal resources to the law school community. For more information, visit pli.edu/law school.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anastasia Boyko, and I am the host of PLI's How to Navigate Law School podcast. How to Navigate Law School is your podcast guide to unlocking the hidden knowledge and practical skills needed to succeed in law school. We connect students with valuable insights from experienced professionals, decompress law school's unwritten rules, and create a supportive community empowering students to confidently create their future. Hello, everyone, and welcome to PLI's How to Navigate Law School. I am your host, Anastasia Boyko, and today I am joined by one of my favorite people, Jen Leonard. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Jen is the founder of Creative Lawyers, also another podcast host at PLI, so a little cross-pollination, which we love. Jen was also the Chief Innovation Officer at University of Pennsylvania Law School, as well as a professor there, and had led their Future of the Law initiative. Is that right?
Future of the Profession
Yes,
initiative.
Profession initiative.
Yeah,
Yes, many words. And also had practiced law. So I am so delighted to have you here. You are one of my icons and someone who I learn so much from every single day, but especially around the topics of innovation and AI. So I'd love to start diving in. Let's talk about innovation in law schools, right? Why would students want to pursue this? Where can they find it? How do we define it? And where does it sit within law schools? Like big picture.
Yeah. Well, I came late to the innovation game probably because I started early as a lawyer. And at the time, there was not a whole lot of innovation. And I was very lucky, as you mentioned, Anastasia, to be in an innovation role at Penn, which meant I got to explore campus and learn from all the other disciplines at Penn how they were thinking about innovation. And it might not surprise you to know that some of them have been doing it for decades longer than we've been doing it in law. But I'll start with your last question first, which is how do we define innovation? And my favorite definition for innovation comes from two professors at Wharton who define it as new ways to unlock value. And the reason I like that definition is because it doesn't have the word technology in it. Technology and innovation are frequently conflated. They are related, but they're not the same thing. And the other reason I like that definition is because there's no modifier to the value part. So value can certainly be ROI and financial, increase to your revenue and your bottom line and all of that. But it can also be cultural value. It can be efficiency value. So I think it's a really open-ended definition, but it gives us a good place to start. I'll go back to your first question, which is why should law students care about innovation or pursue innovation? And I think if you're like you and you're like me and you're like somebody who has decided to make the investment to go to law school, you love to learn and you love to grow. And to me, that's what I love most about innovation is it's all new, right? You're constantly trying to challenge your brain to make connections that are new, to do things in different ways. And I think there are just unprecedented opportunities right now for law students to actually lean into innovation. And I think when you and I graduated law school, even if it was a passion, there weren't that many outlets for it. But now the world is changing so rapidly that we need people to be learning the law, but also thinking about how to break through the structures that we've sort of traditionally relied upon to be able to face what's ahead. And your second question, I believe, was where to find it in law school. That is a trickier question because it, like any lawyerly answer, like it depends, right? You might be at a law school where the dean, you might be at Suffolk Law School where the dean is really focused on innovation and has been looking to build an innovation muscle for over a decade. Or you might be at a school where they're just getting started. So we can dive into how to think about course selection and different opportunities, but the opportunities abound for people that are lifelong learners.
Yeah, and I love that, like, sort of taking the step back and thinking about innovation. Like, I think about innovation as doing things better, doing things differently with better outcomes. And one of the frustrating things for me is when I came to law school, I felt like we were doing things the same for worse outcomes. And I saw that in the profession as well. And I think my own journey into legal technology and legal innovation, both on the business side of law and legal education, I just keep thinking like there are better ways to do this with better outcomes. Like, and it doesn't have to be technology. Oftentimes the changes are, we have to change the way, like the operational systems that we have or the day-to-day workflows that we have. And the interesting thing about doing innovation in the law is there's so many opportunities for it precisely because we've always done things a certain way as a function of precedent, right? As a function of our pedagogical model. And I wish I was able to find a lot of those programs when I was in law school myself. I think that's why I built the Yale Leadership and Innovation Program with that in mind, is giving students so many different avenues to find inspiration, because not every law school has a dean who is forward thinking or even has time to be forward thinking, frankly, because it is so much work to operate an institution like that, and may not have a sister business school who has programming. And so helping students to find those resources, whether they're at their own law school, whether they're at their own university or at another law school, I think is becoming easier and easier because of just technology and information being more available than it was 20 years ago when we were doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, the idea of technology and innovation not being the same thing. Of course, now I spend a lot of my time focused on AI, and I know we're going to talk about that today. But until the ChatGPT moment arrived, I focused a little bit when I was working with law students on tech training and development and thinking about how to infuse technology into your practice. But to your point, our model when we created the program we did at Penn was really focused on systems redesign and design thinking and making legal systems more human-centric, whether that's in the public domain or in a law firm context. And now all of the things that we were thinking about, talking about to make things better and more accessible and usable are accelerated through the development of AI. So I think that technology comes in and out of the conversation, but like you said, it's broader and there are different ways to think about it. Even if you're not technologically inclined, you want to think about innovation in a human-centric way. That's an entirely different framing for innovation that's equally, if not more important than just understanding technology.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the practicalities before we get into AI and those tools. But let's give the students and the prospective students some lessons about where to find innovation, whether it's in courses or programs, how to go about that when they first go into law school, or even as they're assessing options for different law schools, and innovation and entrepreneurship is important to them. Where should they look?
Yeah, well, certainly when they're assessing and they're applying to law schools, if innovation and entrepreneurship are important to them, looking at how interdisciplinary their law schools are, we have historically been a very siloed profession, and that can be mirrored on university campuses as well. Although there are schools that are highly interdisciplinary in their DNA. So Penn is an example of that. I happen to be very close to that example, but that was Ben Franklin's original vision for the University of Pennsylvania, was to make lateral connections across schools, because his view was that you can't unlock new value without understanding the world holistically. And so you have schools that are naturally interdisciplinary, and that is part of their makeup. And then there are other schools where that's not the case. It's just not necessarily part of their defining vision for education. So making sure you're looking at interdisciplinary education. And then once you get onto campus, you may go to a very interdisciplinary law school, but that doesn't mean interdisciplinarity just happens. You really do need to take ownership and take advantage of the connections on campus, because it's very easy once you get into law school. It's all consuming, right? Especially your first year. You need to focus on your classes, and you're surrounded by your classmates who are focused on similar things. You could spend 3 years not exploring beyond the walls of the law school. I was that way, actually. The first 6 years I worked in a law school, before I focused on innovation, I really didn't leave the legal education realm. And I used to say when I got the innovation role and started meeting people around campus that if you put me in an MRI machine, all these parts of my brain would be lighting up that really hadn't been activated for a very long time because I was thinking in a specific way. So finding those opportunities to, especially at business schools, at engineering schools, in the healthcare arena, in the education schools, going out and meeting people who are thinking about different problems and learning different frameworks to solve them. And then thinking through how you would adapt those frameworks for legal, because as you said, we haven't done that in a very long time. And now there really is an impetus to do that. So if you start early integrating multidisciplinary frameworks for problem solving into your legal education, it just sets you up to think that way in the future. And it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to get a JD MBA. You can join a club that's at your business school that's not designed for law students, or your nursing school that's not designed for law students. Expand your network, learn from different people who have different goals, and don't pigeonhole yourself into trying to chase the same thing that everybody else is and learning in the same way everybody else is.
Yeah, and it's so much more fun, I think, learning from other schools. I loved your 2030 conference where you had other schools share with us examples of their sort of design thinking and approaches to solving problems. Like, we sometimes forget that we can get very narrow in our myopia in the law, and there's so much to learn from other disciplines. And I'll echo your point. I think schools, especially large research universities, have so many resources, and part of the challenge is figuring out where to go. And so I feel like Yale Law School, where I was, we had that same interdisciplinary culture from the founding of the law school, but it was still a challenge to connect to all of the other portions of the university. I would often hear from students who did a great job or going to at the Innovation Center at the business school and launching certain apps there. But when you look at a curriculum that has over 160 classes offered in a year, it can be super overwhelming to find something and see, oh, there is an entrepreneurship clinic that I can take, and why would I take that? I think part of what I'd encourage law students to think about is you come in super entrepreneurial and creative oftentimes before you start because you're trying to impact the world in a positive way. And the way that you learn in law school tends to be much more rigid and can sometimes atrophy that muscle, right? That creativity muscle that you were talking about. So it's important to push back against that, whether you take a class at the business school or any of the other schools who are working on these disciplines, to remember that you do have that multidisciplinary approach and not to lose the creativity that you're going in with.
Yeah, and also not to lose the internal compass of what you enjoy doing. I remember looking back, I'm so grateful to my very young, very clueless self in law school, because after our 1L year, we took final exams, and then we had the writing competition, which is what it was called at the time, to join a journal or to join law review. And everybody around me was doing it. Like, nobody was not doing it. And we all gathered in this big auditorium, and I was exhausted from taking finals. And we had the blue books out, and we started this 2-day writing competition. And like 2 hours in, I just said, if the reward for this is like doing more of this, I just don't want to do it because it's just not intrinsically aligned with what I enjoy. And I decided not to do it. And looking back, that was kind of bold for me at that time because I was not wired like that. I was like a rules follower. I think I was just tired. But the next year, all my classmates were sort of in my head. You're not going to get a job. You're not on a journal. You're not on law review. But then my property professor needed a research assistant, and he announced it in his second year local government class, and everybody else was busy with journals. And I was frankly terrified because my classmates had convinced me I wasn't going to get a job. And so I volunteered, and he became the most important mentor I've had to this day, continues to be my mentor. I got to work on a really cool book project with him. He ultimately connected me with people in his network that were more closely aligned with things I was interested in. I ended up working for the city of Philadelphia because of his influence. So, do all the things you need to do. But if there's something you're doing that you genuinely really hate and don't want to do any more of, find something different that you really do enjoy. And that includes going outside of the law school to do different things.
Yeah, and this is another reason why I think I adore you. I was similar. I had gone to the information session about doing the Blue Book exam and getting ready to do journal, and I thought, I want nothing to do with this. I had a classmate who had his Blue Book tabbed vertically and horizontally, and then raised his hand to ask what is the best way to tab your Blue Book, and I thought, no. This is not my tribe. I cannot do this for the next year or two. Bless everyone who can. And I need to do something.
What you realize over time, too, my business partner now was on law review, is the most detail-oriented human being on earth. She would have been the one with all the vertical and horizontal tabs.
Yeah.
And that's why I love working with her, because we have completely complementary skill sets. And I think when you're in law school, you think you're supposed to have the same skills that everybody else has. And there's nothing that you can bring of value to the endeavor. But finding ways to both follow your own direction and not be intimidated by your colleagues, but find ways to complement their skills is part of your lifelong journey as a lawyer, I think. I certainly was not
100%.
thinking about it in that way when I left the writing competition.
No, but in hindsight, I agree with you. It's like I don't want to be in the conforming machine. I felt very much like an outsider who didn't belong in law school. And now I'm the person that folks come to for career advice, because I've tried so many different things and I can look at it in a big perspective and I can help guide them through those decisions, right? So I think it is just really important to hold on to your own path, even if you don't know where it leads.
Yeah.
And so that's like a great segue for us to talk about AI, right? Mm-hmm. AI is taking us on a path where we don't know that it's going to lead. And so with your new venture, you have the benefit of seeing how technology and AI operate within law practice. And I'd love to talk about what you're seeing in practical outcomes and examples, especially with junior associates. So as law students are thinking about their path into the profession, what should they be thinking about and getting ready for with use cases in AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. We're in our third year of this AI journey, right? We're about 2.5 years in. I think year one was really most people not believing that this was a real thing that they needed to pay attention to. So we sort of lost a year there, right? Of like this debate over whether it mattered or not. I think last spring, which would have been spring 2024, we were still in persuasion mode. And then in fall of 2024, something happened that it was accelerated over the holidays this year. I keep joking. I think like a lot of lawyers spent the holidays playing with ChatGPT finally, because this year just feels like the year where you don't have to persuade people anymore and the questions are more sophisticated. The challenge, I think, for junior associates at the moment is I don't think that there's been a ton of intentional focus yet on that entry-level point, but that's the part that is likely to change the most and be most in need of fresh thinking. So for people coming out of law school, trying to figure out what skills they need in an AI-infused practice world is really challenging. And unlike when you and I came out of law school, where you could interview with a firm and say, how will you teach me to draft a will or, file a motion? There was an answer because were people there who'd done that for decades. If you came in now as a junior associate and you said to your seniors, like, how would you advise me to practice in an AI-infused world? There's literally nobody at that firm who can tell you, based on firsthand experience, what they should do. And so they're entering a fundamentally different paradigm, which can be scary. But to me, I just always see opportunity to differentiate yourself. So coming out of law school with the mindset that AI will be a critical partner to you as a practicing lawyer and learning what that means and how you communicate it to your future employer, I think is such, again, a differentiator across your peers. Because one thing that I see is a real disconnect between what law firm leaders think law schools are going to produce in their students in the next 1 to 3 years and what the reality of what that will be. And so there's this expectation that there will be all of these AI native lawyers who are ready to hit the ground running and understand exactly how it applies in practice because their law schools have prepared them for that. And I don't think that is likely true across the board. Law schools change very slowly for good reason. And so again, it's all about ownership and taking a proactive mindset to understanding how the technology works and how you can apply your critical thinking, your creativity, your curiosity, and your intelligence to strengthen those outputs from AI, and then be able to talk to your future employer about not only that you understand the technology and its limitations and its benefits, but also that you're not, again, it's a small c conservative profession, right? They don't necessarily want to hire candidates who scare them around AI. You want to assure them that you understand that you're bringing this AI first mindset to their firm to learn alongside the senior lawyers and not to come in and fundamentally reimagine how you practice law. If I were a law firm partner interviewing a law student, that is what I would want to hear, that you have a respect for traditional legal training and you want to expand the way lawyers think about what they do by infusing new technology, and you're excited to bring that to your organization.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me when we look at the state of play, where we see all of these surveys saying that law firms really want law school graduates who are steeped in this. But also law firms themselves are still learning to use these tools and have a lot of parameters about how to use these tools, what data can be put into them, who can use them, right? And then we get surveys from the ABA about how many AI classes are offered. And I often remind people that, the devil's in the details. So how are these being counted? How often are they offered? What is the substance of the class being offered? So there's just a lot of variance in the breadth and depth of AI content currently across all of legal academia, and what can and can't be applied in certain firm contexts and for what reason. So there's just a lot of texture to the tapestry that I try to push people to. But I feel like we fall back into the same challenge we always have, which is the law school practice divide and who is responsible for training young lawyers to be young lawyers. And I think it's always there's a bit of finger pointing across law firms and law schools about who needs to do this. I think in my world, I think both are responsible for this. And there are probably great opportunities for law firms to partner with law schools to create such programs or externships or opportunities to learn. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, how do students, if they want resources and they may not have them at their law schools, get those resources, whether it's free resources from vendors or other law schools that make their AI content public?
Yeah, it's funny because I think the big challenge of the moment is that there's so much information everywhere that it's really hard to curate what is valuable and what is not. At the same time, the flip side of that coin is that you've never had more ability to find your own education and shape it in a way that really supports you in learning about whatever you want. So whether it's a MOOC and you're using Coursera and you're going on and you're learning about artificial intelligence. And again, I would sort of push students and encourage students to not only enjoy the legal domain specific education, though certainly they should, but take a macro view and take a class from Coursera on, AI in a totally different context, and then question, what would this look like in a legal context? Use generative AI to develop a learning roadmap for yourself. Tell ChatGPT, I am a rising 2L and I'm going to pursue this type of practice at the outset. What kind of resources would you recommend to me that I use to begin learning? And then use the AI as a co-creator of your own education. And again, I will say to all the law professors out there, all the judges and lawyers, apply your critical thinking lens, ask for advice, don't rely on AI outputs alone, but the AI outputs are incredibly powerful. My stepdaughter, now I'm working with her, she wants to take the LSAT, and I'm working with her to teach ChatGPT how to be an LSAT tutor for her and how to get stronger over time. One of the things I love about AI is it really allows you to tap into the way that you enjoy learning the most. I've learned about myself just in the last, 6 months or so, that I learn by speaking. I learn by externalizing my thoughts. And I didn't realize that before. And I think one of the challenges I had as a lawyer is most lawyers will tell you that they learn by writing, and that's how they process information. And once I got ChatGPT voice mode and I started being able to talk out loud to a co-intelligence, it really mimicked those early days of practice when I would drop in on a senior associate in her office and we would chat about something and the lights in my brain would go off and I'd make connections I wasn't making just reading cases and writing briefs. And so I think that students have all these cool opportunities now to learn about how they learn and then find tools that allow them to learn in that way. I mean, Notebook LM, for example, if I could have uploaded case law to prep for civil procedure, read the cases, briefed the cases, of course, but then turned it into a podcast that I could listen to have two people break it down for me, my anxiety level and my ability to learn in multimodal formats would have been enormous and a game changer for me as a law student. So I find that to be very exciting for students. There's so much opportunity to find resources and craft your own path that's co-curricular to what you're learning in your core legal education.
I love that so much. We were talking to Heidi Brown in another episode exactly about this, like the sheer importance of understanding how you learn and how you learn in context to other learners with you. I had a similar, challenge when I was in law school. I loved reading and I loved writing, but I couldn't understand or dial into legal reading and writing. I found that I would have to read the same paragraph like 10 times and it just didn't make sense to me. I knew the words individually, but I couldn't glean understanding from it. And I felt really stupid. And I think with ChatGPT and other resources, we now have AI to help us get context around how we learn. And are there other better ways of learning? And I think Notebook LM is a great example, being able to get, quiz questions from your exams or asking if you missed something and how you've briefed a case, right? It actually does create those critical thinking skills of like, what did I miss? Is there another way to look at this? How would the professor look at it given, their particular line of scholarship? Like there's so many opportunities to learn in a more robust way that aren't shortcuts. I often find talking to folks in the academy, they very much want to focus on hallucinations and cheating as opposed to like, where is the opportunity here? Even for my own scholarship, right? I think I may have heard one of your former podcasts talking about like starting with deep research as the beginning point when you're doing any sort of scholarship or writing to make a better foundation. So I think it's important to encourage our legal academy colleagues as well as students to use this as a necessary supplement as opposed to a replacement to the core work that we're doing in law school.
Yeah. And again, going back to students who are just starting to look at law schools, this is why I think leadership mindset is so important. I think one of the reasons there may be in my mind, a perceived disconnect between law firms and law schools about how much AI education law students are going to have is the messaging. When you're told it's cheating, when you're told it's prohibited, you're talking to an audience of people who do tend to be rules followers, who are afraid of not being able to sit for the bar exam, right? So you're setting a tone that this is dangerous and it's cheating. And if you zoomed into another law school where the dean and the senior leaders of the law school and individual professors are saying, look, like it can be cheating. If you want to use it that way, it's a general purpose technology. You could certainly use it that way. But it can also be an enabler of new forms of learning, of deeper diving, of context provision, of just reinforced learning that when we were in law school, you had to self-execute on, right? Like, remember going to the library and they would put out a sample model exam from the year before? And I was so clueless and so intimidated. I would read it and panic because I thought, A, like, I can't believe somebody near my level could write like this in a timed testing environment. And B, I actually don't even understand what's great about it. Like, I could tell it's really well written, but it's not even annotated to say, like, here's where they did something well. But imagine being able to take that sample exam, upload it into, a test preparation GPT that you've customized, and say, tell me what works about this writing. And can you practice with me to see if I can map my own writing onto this and get stronger? And then the other thing that I didn't do in law school was go to office hours, because the idea of me walking in to these learned professors' offices and trying to stumble through the most basic questions I had was just like a recipe for humiliation. So I just didn't do it. And it wasn't because I was lazy, and it wasn't because I didn't understand the value. It was just I was embarrassed and ashamed to go in like that. But if I could go into a forward-thinking professor's office and say, look, I worked with ChatGPT for a while to understand this set of cases, and we sort of reached this place, and now I'm really struggling to understand this one concept. And also, could you tell me what you think of the ChatGPT output? Because I would love to know your thoughts. It's just not having the collaborative conversation, to me, is the more dangerous thing right now than, messing something up or trying something and realizing it hallucinated. And I just think professors also have a huge opportunity and obligation right now to be digging into these tools and helping their students figure out how to use them well.
Yeah, and especially to know what the benefits and downsides are and understand how it thinks so they can understand what the limitations are and what cheating might look like and how these tools would get utilized, right? They said that 90-something% of Harvard undergrads were using ChatGPT, right? So you've got large populations of college students who are very facile with these tools. And if you're going to be teaching them, you should learn how they think about these things. But I, too, was like you. I mean, a core wound of shame around not understanding this really prohibited me from asking questions I needed to ask to understand the material and to have a co-thinker with me in ChatGPT to ask these questions so that I had understanding and I could go into an office and say, this is what I think it says. This is what I think we're trying to understand in this set of cases. Does that sound right? Or am I missing something, right? It really does create a little bit of peace of mind and maybe even psychological safety that is harder to do when you have a professor who's so accomplished and who speaks in such a way that, maybe you understand every third word. But if you have someone to soundboard it with to get the substance of it and even get maybe some other insights through articles and, cited materials so that you can get a better, more plain understanding of it, I feel like we can be in a really good spot when we do go to office hours. I do think if you have a good relationship with a professor, I would encourage students to talk about AI and use cases with them because there are things that they just don't know or maybe haven't practiced that if you have somebody open-minded who you've built a trust relationship with, you might be able to co-author a paper or they might be inspired to use some of your learnings in their class. Like, I think oftentimes when we come to law school, there's this idea that we're peers in some way, right? Co-creators in some way. At least that's what was communicated to us at Yale, is you get to co-create with these brilliant academics. And this really is an opportunity for that in a world where both of you are learning together on a technology that no one's seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that may be helpful to your listeners as law students or soon to be law students, and something that sadly did not occur to me for a very long time, like too long, it just should have been obvious, is when you feel intimidated by your law professor and you walk in and you feel like you only understand every third word and they're such experts, realize too that in many cases, they have taught the same exact class, like sometimes dozens of times. And so if you taught the same class dozens of times, you too would be very facile with the language. You too would be expert in all of the cases. You are experiencing it for the first time and as somebody new to the law. And that was just one of those light bulb moments for me. And I thought, oh, and I learned this when I was a career counselor for law students. So it was like too late for me. But if I had thought of that in that way, I might have felt a little bit less insecure, more secure. And the other thing I will add too to your study about Harvard students using ChatGPT 90% of the time, new research shows that the hard sciences tend to be using AI more than the humanities, than even business students, and certainly law students. And the reason I think that matters is because whether you work in a law firm, a corporate legal department, in the government, in the public interest, the places around you, whether they're your clients or broader society, are full of people trying to solve problems from different perspectives, including from the STEM backgrounds. And you want to be a sophisticated partner to them. And I think 5 years from now, if you have a tech client or a science research-based client, and you don't understand how to use AI, and they all have been using it for years, I just think it puts you at such a disadvantage to be considered a peer professional to them, which I think is just another reason to be accelerating our exploration of it.
Yeah, and I'll also add, I feel like the AI models are actually pretty good with language as opposed to mathematics. And so, utilize that, right? They've had training on this and see what they can do to be able to enhance some of the humanities there. I'll add to your law professor point, one thing that I also realized too late is oftentimes the people who are successful in academia are folks who also naturally did well in law school. And so I had to explain this to one of my friends who's a fantastic law professor, but couldn't understand why every law student can't can't pick up what he can pick up. I reminded him, I was like, you naturally got this and enjoyed law school because your brain is wired in such a way that this becomes a natural language to you. It's partially why you were successful in law school, why you were successful on the academic circuit and moving into that direction. So because you are sort of in many ways set up well to succeed in this environment, it's going to be hard for you to understand other people who are obviously really smart, but may not have brains that are set up to learn and process information in that same way. And it's now your obligation to figure out how they think and help them understand those things. So having a natural gift can sometimes be a punishment when you're teaching other people who may not have that same modality of thinking.
Definitely. I mean, it can definitely create blind spots. And again, with AI, I think it's another way that students who are, not as naturally inclined to succeed at law school, which is certainly me for sure, now have these opportunities to learn in new ways. And I hope that it leads to more different types of thinkers in the legal profession to help us solve these big thorny problems that we need to solve. And I hope that those skills are more highly valued. I would also add, just as a concrete piece of advice for law students who are selecting their upper level courses, is to make sure that you are creating a nice blend of your doctrinal faculty members who are focused full-time on legal research with adjunct professors who are out in practice, seeing this on the ground every day. And then to the earlier discussion, learning in the first couple of weeks and through their syllabus how they think about AI, and trying to find some professors who are adjunct professors who are really interested in teaching you what AI means in practice or exploring with you. The first semester I got to teach with Bridget McCormick, we taught a class, there were no cases yet. There were no law review articles yet. And we were very candid with the students on day one, like, we are learning with you because nobody has any idea what's happening. And we found, there are a few students who are going to drop your class because they're like, we need to know exactly what we have to do. And those are probably the students who are already thriving in law school and enjoy that environment. But I actually think that the students enjoyed the idea that we also did not know. And this was an unbelievable opportunity to learn together. And just a small story about that, when we were teaching, was the weekend when they fired Sam Altman at OpenAI happened that semester. And our students were like all over the message boards. And I remember texting Bridget and saying, like, I feel badly bothering them on the weekend with this. But we didn't even have to, because they all started posting on Canvas like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And remember, we read that article and I think this is what's going on. And I've just never seen any topic in my lifetime that is similar in how quickly it changes and how early you can be on the ground floor and learning about it.
Yeah, it's almost like, like the worry is plagiarism and cheating, but actually the boon is make learning fun again, right?
Oh.
Like this is such an opportunity for that. I feel like you and I could talk for hours, but I would like to wrap us up. The last question I ask everybody is what advice you have to your former law school self. We've covered a few topics, but if you have any things that you want to wrap up for baby lawyer you, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, I think I would say it's all going to be okay. You're going to be all right, and you're going to find your way, and your way is not going to be the same as everybody else, but it's going to be super cool for you, and that's all that matters.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll link there some of the resources that you mentioned as well as your bio, but I always continue to learn from you. Thank you for leading the way through this thought leadership, and I'm delighted to have you join us.
Oh, right back at you, Anastasia. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to How to Navigate Law School, the podcast dedicated to guiding you through the hidden rules and practical skills essential for success in law school. For additional resources, visit PLI's Law School Hub at pli.edu/law school. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI. PLI is a nonprofit learning organization dedicated to keeping attorneys and other professionals at the forefront of knowledge and expertise.